and welcome back to Christina's story. Um, this episode, we're going to get back into my story. If you haven't seen my prior videos, I've been walking you through the story of my chronic illness, my lupus diagnosis, um, other things that have happened in my life over the years. And in our last video, we left off talking about recovering from my first open heart surgery and compartment syndrome and having a fasciotomy. And I had just gone back to work after those surgeries and was back to living by myself in Central California. Did take a break from the storytelling to do an interview with my mom that turned out really good.
Really good.
So if you haven't taken an opportunity to watch that video yet, I would recommend it. But we're going to jump back in where we left off in the timeline of events. So as I mentioned, at this point, I'm back living in Central California, by myself, 4 hours away from home. At this time, I started physical therapy, because I couldn't really walk properly. I was walking with a walker, and my mobility was extremely limited. I didn't have any control over my foot or my toes, and my foot was stuck like this. I couldn't put it down to stand. So it was very difficult to get around. I was using a walker. Eventually, through physical therapy, I graduated from a walker to a cane. I walked for a cane with a cane for a while. And then eventually I was able to walk without any mobility aids, but I did have a limp for a very long time. Physical therapy was not fun.
Don't overdo it.
But God definitely sustained me through that. I would not want to go through that again. Physical therapists are lovely people who enjoy inflicting pain on you for your own good. At least they tell you it's for your own good, and I would just look at them like, I don't believe you, but okay. But eventually the physical therapy did help, as I mentioned, and I was able to regain my mobility. It did take a few years before I was recovered enough that I wasn't walking with a limp or that it wasn't obvious that I had some kind of issue, but eventually I did make an almost full recovery with mobility. I still have limited range of motion in my foot, but it's not anything that would be noticeable to an average person, and I've learned to cope with it. It doesn't really affect me too much. Around that time, I had an opportunity to move to Arizona for my job.
Arizona?
I hated living in Central California. So I would have taken an opportunity to go literally anywhere else.
I hated it.
And my job that I did wasn't going to be there anymore anyway. So I would have either had to change jobs or change locations. And I chose to change locations. So I went on a house hunting trip. It was like 4 days that the company gave me to find a place to live. My mom came with me, and we looked at a bunch of places, and I ended up signing a lease, and about a month later, I was living in Arizona. I didn't know anything about Arizona, never lived in Arizona, knew that it was hot as the surface of the sun.
Too hot. Too hot.
But it was still better than my current situation. So, I was just starting over from ground zero. The night before I ended up signing a lease somewhere, it was the next day was going to be my last day to find somewhere. And I was back at the hotel with my mom, and I was just by myself taking a shower, and I started panicking like, I can't do this. What was I thinking? I don't know anybody here.
You're right. What have I done?
And I kind of started to privately melt down. But once I had a lease signed, I did feel a lot better. And not too long after I moved to Arizona, my divorce was finalized. I wasn't hearing from him at all, so I eventually did go ahead and file for divorce, and he acknowledged to me that he received the divorce papers, but he never responded to them, so the divorce went through as a default judgment, which was just a very accurate summary of how that relationship went.
He's been served.
Um, he didn't show up for me during our marriage, and he didn't show up to dissolve the marriage, so, um, even though I was glad on one hand to have that chapter closed because it had been in limbo for years at this point. It was still sad. The day that I went and filed the papers at the court was difficult because no one enters a marriage thinking that they're going to get divorced. So um, while it was partially a relief to have it done and over with, that was also not an easy time. Um, but God wasn't just closing chapters, he was opening new ones for me. Not long after that, I met Ryan, who is my husband now. I really was just looking for friends.
We're just friends.
Like I mentioned, I didn't know anybody here. I did eventually make friends with a lot of my coworkers, but I was not emotionally available or really looking for a relationship. But God knew what I needed better than I did. And this is the season of life where I met Ryan. I was still healing physically from my surgeries, I was still healing emotionally from my divorce. And I told him on one of our first dates, just so you know, I'm never getting married again. And I meant it. I meant it at the time. Um, so things started to get better when I had Ryan in my life. I didn't feel so alone. I was recovering well from surgery. I was getting mobility back. I was going to a lot of like sporting events and went back to the gym and was living a pretty normal life again. I also at this time was able to go in and have reconstructive surgery on my leg because it had never closed up all the way from the wound vac that they had on it. So they were able to go in, take a lot of the scar tissue out, and then properly close it up, which was amazing to have that done. I mean, compared to everything else, that surgery was quite minimal. Um, and I was like so excited to have my leg completely closed up and not have to deal with that part of it anymore. So definitely we're rebuilding our lives together. Ryan and I were growing closer together, and we started going to church together. We were growing closer to God. Um, Ended up getting engaged when we were on a work. I was on a work trip in the Bahamas, and we got engaged in the Bahamas. and a year later, we were married in Las Vegas in a little tiny chapel that no longer exists, by Elvis, with about 20 of our close friends there with us.
Right here at the world famous Lee Kirk of the Heather Wedding Chapel, right here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. That's it. Good night. All right, I haven't left the building yet, man. Now, Ryan, I want you to look into your beautiful bride's eyes, all right? And repeat after me, please, sir. Christina? Christina? If I had the name right. It is Christina, right? I will always love you tender. I will always love you tender. And I will always be. I will always be. Your hunk of burning love, baby.
We also bought a house, right? Like a month before we got married, we closed on our house together. So things were going really well for us. Every year I would go in and get an echocardiogram just to make sure that everything was okay and that my valves were still working properly and that there was no regrowth of the tumor.
It's not a tumor.
And I was told that if I made it 5 years, I would kind of be out of the woods as far as that tumor recurring, statistically speaking. So
I don't do math.
each year I would go in, be confident. I could see them doing the echocardiogram on the screen, and I just got so used to seeing it. Like I could generally tell if things looked okay or not. If they start circling, that's what they always did when there was an issue. So if they weren't doing too much circling, I felt pretty good coming out of that. Year 5 came and it was time to go get that echocardiogram, and I just going into it had an uneasy feeling
I have a bad feeling about this.
for the first time. I just felt like this I'm not gonna get the news that I usually get this time. I couldn't tell you why. It was just a gut feeling. And the doctor confirmed my fears. He did tell me that there was a tumor there again, 5 years later. So that was very difficult to hear. I don't even really recall a lot of that conversation. Ryan was there with me, and I do remember that I did cry that time. I wasn't as stoic as I was the first time that I found out I had a tumor. It was harder because like I knew what that meant, like what dealing with that was going to entail. So I think it was actually harder the second time to hear it. And I remember leaving and getting in the elevator with Ryan and just crying and say, I can't do this again. Um, it was very scary. I didn't understand why God brought me through all that, and now I was back here again. It was not what anyone was hoping to hear. When I felt like I was finally getting my life back together, to get that news again was very scary. But my story wasn't over. Um, it would actually end up being 4 long years before I would have my second open heart surgery. So, in our next installment, I'm going to take you through that journey of living with the tumor for 4 years and of losing 100 pounds in order to safely get that second surgery. When I had my second open heart surgery, there were complications again. So we'll talk about that as well. If you would like to hear more about my story of chronic illness and how God has carried me through each and every hurdle, I would encourage you to subscribe so you can see when I post again. And if you wouldn't mind liking this video and leaving a comment down below. Thank you.